And I hate to say it, but we live in a world more and more where we're just all on our phones and mindlessly scrolling, right? Social media, doing whatever we're doing. And it's taking away from some of that just being present in our lives. Yep. How often do you go to restaurants and just people are on their phone instead of just like sitting there and like being in the moment, right? How often are people walking and you see them looking down at their phones instead of just being mindful, right? So we live in a world today with more distractions than ever before. Right. And so it's even more important that we practice these skills because mindfulness really helps us to regulate our emotions too.
Hello again, guys. How many of you have ever gotten out of control when you're getting stressed, or that you can't calm down your mind, or you said something without thinking or done something without acting, which is pretty much my entire childhood, or you can't fall asleep because your brain is going too fast? All of those are me. I don't know about you guys. But we have a great episode today about mindfulness. And before you get your hippie hats out or whatever, you think we're, throwing that word around. I am wearing sandals, but it's just because they're comfy. Listen, pay attention. This really is just an amazing, amazing episode, an amazing topic that we're going to get on today. Just jam-packed full of information. I am your host, Mitchell Bates.
Co-host, Lindsay Taylor.
All right, with the Hope Institute. All right, we're super, super excited. So, Lindsay, this is your wheelhouse. I mean, this is why we've got you on. You got the brains and
somewhat. Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Okay, so we had touched on a couple of things like why, what mindfulness can help with, but like what's the important, or like where do we start here?
Yeah. So, I busted out my notes today because I'm like, there's a lot and I could go on and on and on. And so I'm going to stay focused, just like mindfulness teaches us to do. Okay. So mindfulness is really present moment, being aware and being in the present moment. So we call that being open-minded without judgment. So we bring our attention to the moment and we are non-judgmental of our experience. And then attentional control, which means staying focused. So focusing on one thing at a time. So there's
that's
two.
That's always been my thing.
Yeah.
I'm always all over the place.
Yep. So open-minded, just noticing our thoughts and feelings without judgment, and staying focused. Right. One thing at a time. So that's kind of what mindfulness is. I think you mentioned, and I love it, we're not busting out our hippie, I think sometimes when you think of mindfulness, you think of meditation.
Right. So it's like it kind of has that same connotation.
Kind of has, yes. Yeah, that hippie vibe, okay. Sometimes. Yeah.
Which, hey, if
nothing
you're
wrong with the hippie vibe.
We're not judging if that's what you like to do, but
usually that's what people think when they think mindfulness, right? And obviously, the more you can practice mindfulness, the better off you are. So if you've got that nailed, you're probably
just as
living
as a mental exercise. Yeah. Which is why you use it in a clinical setting.
Right.
Correct?
Right. So mindfulness is more than just meditation. So you can practice mindfulness with, being intentional on focusing on your breath, doing it through more a meditative type state. But you can also be mindful of anything in your day, anything in your experience, in your world. And so you can practice mindfulness while walking, while eating, while driving. Again, it's all about bringing your attention to that present moment and just noticing, like, what am I seeing? What am I feeling? What am I hearing? Just fully focusing in that moment on one thing at a time.
No, that's great. Just to take kind of like an inventory.
Yes. Yes. So I like to give the example of like, if you're practicing mindfulness while walking, you're feeling your feet hit the ground. So you're actually taking the time to like bring your awareness to your feet. What do you feel underneath you? What do you hear? Listening to the sounds around you. Right. What are you noticing? What do you see? What can you feel? What can you taste maybe? Like you're bringing your awareness, using your senses is a good way to be mindful. It helps you get in that moment and to stay present. So I like to encourage clients to use their senses to try and be mindful.
That's awesome. What you just said, staying present, like that's what was coming to my mind is like, there are so many more distractions now than there ever were.
Yes.
To where it's like, hey, like if we can find a way to disconnect, not that those other things are bad necessarily, but it's like we have to balance it out.
Yes.
With an equal part of us
Yeah.
coming back to the moment,
Yeah.
the present.
Exactly.
love
And I
that.
hate to say it, but we live in a world more and more where we're just all on our phones and mindlessly scrolling, right? Social media, doing whatever we're doing. And it's taking away from some of that just being present in our lives.
Yeah.
How often do you go to restaurants and just people are on their phone instead of just like sitting there and like
Enjoying
being
the
in the moment,
ambiance
right?
and-
How often are people walking and you see them looking down at their phones instead of just being mindful, right? So we live in a world today with more distractions than ever before.
Right.
And so it's even more important that we practice these skills because mindfulness really helps us to regulate our emotions too.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they say that when we ruminate too much, so when we're constantly thinking about the past, that can lead to depression. When we project, when we're constantly thinking about future, that can lead to anxiety. And so true like contentment in life and joy is found in the present moment. And so again, mindfulness helps us to get to that present moment.
Awesome. I don't know about you guys, but that's what I want.
I struggle with that too.
Right?
I teach it and I struggle with it. It's like building a muscle. It takes constant repetition and
Yeah.
constant practice.
No, 100%. You got to
Yeah.
put the reps in. Well, the book, 10,000 Hours, you heard of that
Yeah.
one?
No, 10,000 hours?
It's like if you want to become an expert at anything, you have to put it. That's like the,
Basically.
the minimum amount of time you got to put into it. So it's like it takes
So true.
time, repetition, over and over and over to do it.
So true.
Well,
Yeah.
so we talked a little bit about, why it's important, different things like that. Like, what were some of the other things we talked about?
Yeah, so we covered what is mindfulness. So the next part is why is it important?
Yeah.
I think to touch on that a little bit more. So you opened it with, have you ever said something you wish you could take back? Done something you later regretted? Felt angry or out of control with your emotions? Anxious or nervous? Have you ever felt that way? I think all of us had trouble falling asleep because your mind wouldn't stop.
See, that's the one I've been dealing with lately. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, like I just.
Yeah. We all struggle with that. That's just part of our human experience. And so mindfulness helps to address these very things. So we see anxiety is on the rise, stress, especially I work with youth populations. And so I would teach this in the school and it's definitely on the rise in schools. And so research shows that practicing mindfulness daily can actually, it rewires your brain. So it's almost like doing neurosurgery on your brain.
Yeah.
And so it helps us to increase our focus, to recognize and manage our emotions, to make better decisions, to empathize in our relationships. So I like to say that our mind is perhaps our most powerful asset. And when we strengthen our mind, that helps us to better manage our emotions and all those things I just listed. So again, mindfulness helps us get there, helps us to strengthen
that's going
our
to
mind.
help with whether you're in school, whether you're at work or in your family. Like
Yeah.
that's just going to make you better at all of those things.
Yep.
That's awesome. That's
Yep.
awesome. I love it.
Yeah, there's a bunch of other lists of benefits like improved sleep. It actually can help with immune functioning. It can help with like memory, better concentration and focus. So, I mean, it's got a whole list of,
No, that's
of
awesome.
health benefits.
And let us know which ones of those you are more interested in, or which ones you want to hear more about, because we can get people that we can interview. We can do separate standalone videos where we can give you more of that information, where we can really dive deeper, as opposed to taking 5 hours on the podcast
Right.
to go over, which we could.
Right. Right.
But yeah, so please, yeah, what's next here?
Yeah. So that's just kind of the overview of what is it, why is it important. So how do you practice mindfulness, or what are some things you can do? So one of the skills that we teach in DBT is called wise mind skills. So the wise mind skill basically states that we have 3 states of mind. Okay. So we have our wise mind, and then we have our emotional mind and our rational mind. So we look at it as like what do they call that? A Venn diagram, where it's like a circle in the middle. So wise mind is in the middle, emotion mind and rational mind. And often when I draw it for clients, I draw the emotional mind as like a bigger circle, and then we've got the middle wise mind, and then the rational mind's a little smaller. And I always ask clients, I'm like, why did I draw the emotional mind bigger? And I usually put it in red. And that's to illustrate that our emotional mind it feels bigger. It's hotter, it's heavier. And sometimes what happens in our day-to-day lives is we let our emotions control us instead of us learning to control our emotions.
Yeah.
And again, mindfulness helps us to be able to better control our emotions. So we want to become the driver of our emotions. We don't want our emotions driving us.
100%.
Yeah.
It's almost like everything that happens, it's like, which one do you let it go through first? Do you let it go through the emotional side or the logical side,
Yes.
the rational side first? And so it's like
Yes.
being able to
Yeah.
regulate that. So it's like, okay, like if something happens, let's deal with the rational side,
Right.
and that will help us respond emotionally how we want
so
to.
That's what wise mind is. So
Awesome.
so we know what emotional mind is, and then rational mind is when we're just thinking strictly with like logic, facts, reasoning. The sweet spot is our wise mind. That's where we really want to get our mind throughout each and every day, because wise mind allows us to honor our emotions. We want to honor how we're feeling, but also strive to act rationally.
See, I love
so
that.
it's finding that balance.
I love that because like I've watched the stoicism and I watched some of those kind of channels and everything where it's like all about like how you just get rid of the emotions so that no one can take advantage of you, so that you can never go off the handle, you can never blah 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 blah. And I'm just like, I mean, I get why they're saying that because of all the things that can come with letting your emotions drive your entire life. But I feel like they're still important.
Oh yeah, no,
like they can drive the motivation that you have and like give you passion and like allow you to really experience everything around you, as opposed to just walking around like some emotionless. Oh my gosh, I can't talk. Some emotionless, amorphous blob.
Right.
You know?
So when we teach this to kids, I talk about like, okay, what is the problem with being strictly in your emotional mind? What happens when we're there? And what happens when we're strictly in rational mind and we're not considering our emotions? Either way, if we're in one of those states, we're going to be missing something. And so that's where the wise mind is. We're considering how we're feeling. Our emotions guide us. They're messengers. They help us understand maybe where we're at, what we're missing. But then the rational side helps us come in and stick to the facts, because a lot of times we end up, when we start to judge our thoughts, we put interpretations on them, and then that leads to a whole rabbit hole of things, right? And so, again, getting to that wise mind is honoring our emotions and how we're feeling and thinking rationally, thinking what is the facts here, and bringing those two together. So it's marrying the two. It's a perfect combination, and it takes mindfulness skills to be wise.
Awesome.
It takes mindfulness skills to do that. So
to be able to
get
come
in
back
wise
to the
mind.
moment and say, okay, like what is going on right now? What am I feeling? Whether it's physically or emotionally. Okay, what are those emotions? Why are those emotions coming in? And then let's kind of attach some logic to what's going on. Is that kind of what you're getting to?
Yeah. So like think about when you have anxiety and your heart starts to race or your palms start to sweat. Sometimes what will happen is we'll start to think, oh my gosh, I'm having a heart attack, right? That's an extreme. But sometimes that, like, especially when people have panic attacks, they start to feel those uncomfortable symptoms. And then we start to put a narrative to it, or we judge it, and we're jumping to something that's not the fact of the situation, right? The fact is maybe something happened that got us anxious. Our body responded. It released stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. And so that's why our heart's racing, because our mind maybe thought we were in danger when we weren't really, right? But then we start to judge it, place meaning on it. If we can just pull back and just label, my heart is racing, I'm feeling anxious, my palms are sweating. If we can just like stick to the observable facts, this is how I'm feeling. When we do that, we can actually allow ourselves to think more clearly and then get in that rational mind and think, okay, am I really having a heart attack, or am I just experiencing anxiety right now?
Yeah, well, because it's like cortisol and adrenaline, like we are designed with those chemicals for a reason.
Right.
Like, am I in danger? Like, what? You know, it's like that's your body's response to what's going on.
And sometimes we need that. It's an important...
Right, exactly. Yeah. But it's like we're not always being chased by a saber tooth or a lion or whatever. It's like that's how we were designed for a reason.
Yeah.
But those lions and saber tooth people, oh my gosh, see, now I'm like going into like fantasy land here. But like those threats that we had before aren't present anymore.
Right.
So we need to like tell our mind like, well, hey, like you're not dying.
Yes, exactly. So we need to be able to think, what is the facts here, and think more rationally. I always say that our brain can't differentiate between a lion chasing us and being worried about a test, for example. Our brain doesn't necessarily know the difference. If we're concerned about a test, we might have the same physiological response
See, that's
that we
crazy.
do when a lion is chasing us. But
That's
we have to be the
insane.
ones to be able to be like, wait a second, I'm not in actual danger in this moment.
That blows my mind. That like you literally have the same physiological
Reaction.
response.
Yep.
Same with, I don't like that person that I want to
Yeah.
talk to or
Yeah.
whatever. Man, so it's so funny though, because when people are like, well, it's all in your head. Well, it's like, yes, it is.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that it's not
And it's very
important.
real.
And it's very real.
You're experiencing those symptoms are very, very real. And so it's when our amygdala, which is the emotions part of our brain, when that is activated, if we can just sit and label how we're feeling, that actually deactivates the amygdala. Because it allows us to get in that mindful space of like, wait a second, what's really happening here? And so our bodies will re-regulate itself, but it is based on our response and our reactions.
Now, when you say label, I kind of want you to go more into that, because it's like when we hear the word label,
Right.
I feel like that comes with a very negative connotation.
Yes.
Right. Labels, like, I hate labels, whatever, blah, blah, blah.
Right,
But can you go into that? Like, what does that mean, labeling?
So labeling means you're literally just labeling how you're feeling. My heart is racing. My palms are sweating. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling anxious. You're just pointing out. You're putting a label on what you're experiencing without judgment or interpretation.
There we go.
So without putting further interpretation on it. So what can happen is my heart is racing, and then we go to I'm dying, right? That's an interpretation
or
judgment.
I'm feeling so angry. Like, why am I such an idiot? Why do I keep doing this? Why do I keep losing my temper?
Right. That's a judgment. That's an interpretation.
Okay, I see.
So with mindfulness, we're labeling, we're noticing how we're feeling without judgment. That's the key, without interpretation.
Perfect. It's just to state the facts. To take inventory of what is going on right now.
Yes.
And then we assess each threat accordingly.
Yep.
Is it or is it not?
Yep. We're acknowledging the emotion or the feeling or the thought, and then we're looking at what is the facts here, the rational part of things. I love it.
Man, is that I just feel like like so much has like opened my mind, right? Like, man, if I could have just known this,
I know.
The other day, literally. I know, seriously, it's like I could have used this like yesterday or today.
Yes.
It's like so many things that I'm getting worried about. It's like running all of this, like, what idea, we were just talking, like, what are the ideas that we're going to do for the next video, and how do you record it, and how do you post it, and how do you do all this stuff? It's like,
you're projecting.
I know.
And you're not just in the moment.
I know.
Right?
I know. Just enjoying this, because it's like, I love this. We've got Tyler back in the back there, where it's just like, I love this collaborative kind of process, but I need to live in the moment. It's like, it doesn't matter, will I have this much of this or this much of that, whether it's subscribers, right? Because that's kind of the world I deal in. If it's money, if it's relationships, if it's, all these other things, then that creates this, anxiety over what's going to happen.
And that brings us to the intentional focus part of mindfulness, where we have to one thing at a time and stay focused in that moment. And so that's the other thing. I think when we start to project and we're consumed with all this future thinking, we're not in the moment. We're not staying focused.
And have you ever had it? Because I know that this has happened with me. And if it happened with you, please put it in the comments, where it's like, oh, but what about this? What about this? It's like, it's going to take so much work, and I get so caught up in how big I can see it being, to where I'm like, it's too much work, and I just say it's hopeless, so I'm not even going to do it.
Shut down.
I'm not even going to try.
Yep.
Because it's too much. It's like it's too far in the future.
Yes.
So I just.
Yep, you're doing too much future thinking. Oh yeah, for sure.
That's one of the things I struggle with.
Well, again, we all struggle with this. It's a part of our human condition. It's a part of who we are. And so, 100%. I totally. All these things we're talking about, like I said, this is something, even though I know all these things, I constantly have to be so intentional about in my own day-to-day life. And I find myself doing the same thing, past, future thinking. And I have to catch myself and be like, wait a second, right now, right here in this moment, one thing at a time.
Beautiful.
So it's a lot easier said than done. It does take a ton of practice. I want to acknowledge that.
Well, it's like pointing out, it's like, I don't know, it might sound cliche or whatever, but it's like recognizing it is the first step.
Absolutely.
Like even if you're labeling all your emotions, but you're still attaching judgment or whatever, at least you're taking the step to label them.
Right.
Let's worry about detaching the judgment maybe later, but like just focus on the first part.
Totally. And I want to add to that piece because judgments are naturally gonna happen.
It's
and
part
so
of the human nature.
Is. Yeah. And so we always say, don't judge your judging, right? Like, so the whole key is to catch your judgments. So notice when you're judging and then redirect.
Interesting. Because it's like, it's giving yourself grace too.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, I was being really judgmental, either of myself or somebody else.
Yes.
And going, okay, well, stop.
Yep.
Don't beat yourself up.
Yes.
But just move on.
Exactly. So you want to catch the judgments when you notice it and then just redirect it. And so a lot of mindfulness is just starting over and over and over. Like that's a big part of it. And acknowledging what, as you're having thoughts pop up, you can acknowledge, is this harmful or is this helpful? It's okay to acknowledge those things too, right? But we're just being really careful of not putting too much interpretation or judgment or catching ourselves when we do and redirecting.
Perfect. Perfect. Oh my gosh. So, So is there more?
You know,
I want to hear more.
Research shows that we talked about this, that we can't actually multitask. And so that's another reason why it's really important to just focus on one thing at a time. Right. Because we're going to be able to be a lot more effective in our day-to-day lives when we can put our attention in one thing in the moment.
No, I love that. I'm going to find an appropriate way to say this. So Ron Swanson, have you ever watched Parks and Rec?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I've seen, I
love that. So I was like, one of the things he says is essentially the principle of what he says is you shouldn't do two things halfway.
Right.
He's like, do one thing all the way.
Right.
And so that way you're that much more effective at it.
So I guess I should rephrase that.
It's
not that we can't multitask. We can, but we're not going to be as effective with it.
Right. Because it's like you're going from this to this to this to this as opposed to truly like doing them both at the same time.
Right. Like how many times do you guys have the TV on and are also scrolling on your phone?
Right.
How
it's like, but you're not actually.
Were you able to pay attention to what was on the TV when you were scrolling on your phone? No, you're missing things when you're multitasking.
And this is just kind of a side note, but that's why one of the things that I love, the book Atomic Habits. It's so amazing. But one of the things he talks about, because of that attribute that we have, that we cannot actually multitask.
Right.
He talks about the importance of systems, setting up systems, whether it's like things in your daily life, to where you don't have to think about what it is that's going on. It's just going to happen naturally. Or any habit that you have, that's already kind of ingrained, if you want to add a habit, attach it to something that's already systematized.
Oh, I love
so that it becomes, it's that much easier to do. So if you guys want to know more about that, let's definitely let us know. We should just make a video, have a bigger conversation on that, because having those systems in place can make reducing the stress that much easier when we have stuff like this happen, as opposed to like, I have to pick my kids up from school, I have to make food, I have to go to work, I have to get this project done, I have to get this report done, et cetera, et cetera. It's like when we can I have to work out, I have to eat healthy, I have to do all of these different things. It's like if we can make those as automatic as possible, systematized as possible, then we can really kind of focus on that one thing.
Right.
Because it's like all that other stuff's just kind of taken care of.
Exactly.
So it's just kind of a cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to talk more on that. But
cool. Yeah. So another mindfulness skill that we teach that we actually touched on in a previous video is the STOP skills. So pretty simple.
Let's go into this one again.
Yeah. The STOP, and DBT loves their acronyms.
I just used this on my kids the other day. I kid you not.
Yeah.
What was so funny? Okay, you say what STOP is, and then I'll tell you what happened. I'll tell you what happened with my kid.
The S literally stands for stop. So sometimes you have to tell yourself in your mind, like, stop. Like to actually catch yourself,
it's
right?
Like, smack yourself upside the head.
So the S stands for stop. The T stands for take a breath. That's the other thing. Like the quickest way to regulate our nervous system is to just breathe. And so that's really important one.
It's important stuff. Breathing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys know.
Breathing's really important.
That's an important thing to do.
Yeah. And then the O stands for observe. So again, just observing, noticing what you're feeling, labeling without interpretation or judgment. And then the P is proceed mindfully. So with that wise mind, what is the balance of the two? What's the emotions? What's the logic and the reasoning, the facts? Marrying those together. So that's the stop skill that we teach.
There you go. So when I was talking to my 10-year-old, he was getting stressed out or whatever, and then I told him the whole stop acronym. And then he's going on, he's like, Dad, I can't remember. He's like, I can only remember the stop and the proceed part. He like missed everything
He missed
to like
the in-between
actually
steps.
the in-between. And I was
Yeah.
like, that was just kind of funny. It's like, how often do we do that? Anyway,
Right.
it cracked me up. But
That's so funny.
the taking a breath and observing, right, is so important. 'Cause for me, and I've gotten better, and my wife can attest to this, maybe not me getting better, but like, I used to, and I still struggle with it sometimes, is I used to spiral like crazy. Like and part of it is kind of these exercises, and I also had started taking medication to help me regulate that a little bit better. But it was like I would start on one thought, and then it would end up, 10 miles down the road, and we're like, how in the world did you get there?
Right.
And it was because it was just I didn't stop and just like take a breath and think about what's going on.
Yes.
It's like it would just go and go and go and go. And it's like, if you were to look at me start to finish, it's like, how in the world did you get to these existential crisis questions from being worried about what was going to happen at work tomorrow?
Essentially, you let emotion mind take hold, right? And we do that so often. We all do. Like, I had to learn this big time in parenting. Like, I was a big reactor before I learned these things. Like, my kids would do something, or I'd get upset and I would just react. Yes, and I would yell and, just react on emotion, right? And be all up in my emotional head, and sometimes take it way farther than it needed to go, right?
Yeah.
So when I learned these skills, I realized there's so much power in stopping, taking a breath, maybe stepping away for a few minutes until I can come to my kids and act like a level-headed human being, adult, parent, right? Because oftentimes we have situations that trigger us. That's the bottom line. And as a parent, if you're a parent, you can relate. Like, you love your kids to death, and they do things sometimes that just push your buttons, right? And a lot of times we don't use mindfulness. We just react. And so another piece of mindfulness is helping us to pause and reflect so that we can handle things in a much healthier way, rather than just reacting on impulse.
Amazing. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I remember one time, and I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but rage quitting. I play video games quite a bit, so I don't know.
I can't relate.
You can't relate really with that. But like, I remember one time I kept losing over and over and over again, and I just like squeezed my controller like as hard as I could. And I actually broke it in half.
Oh my gosh.
And I was just like,
big emotional reaction.
Maybe I should take a break. But I was just like, I literally had like both halves of like one half of the controller in each hand, and I was like, maybe I should learn how to calm down when I'm playing video games a little bit.
That is so
isn't that crazy?
funny.
It's so funny. Anyways, no, but incredible. I mean, honestly, and this is why we had a whole separate episode on mindfulness.
Yeah.
And because it was part of the DBT episode that we had.
Yeah.
But being able to, I mean, this is like the first step in the DBT. What are the other three? Because we're gonna have an episode on each one.
Yeah.
What are the other three?
Emotion regulation, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness.
Perfect. So like, this really is the perfect beginning to all of those things.
Yeah.
To be able to regulate emotions better, to have better relationships with people.
Yep. And then distress tolerance. Yeah, you have to be able to be mindful.
Yeah, because it's like how resiliency, I think, is one of the things that we struggle with. I mean, we just how many things that we just mentioned just from us alone,
right?
Of not being resilient enough when things happen, right? It's like life is, I see if I can get it right this time. Life is 10% what happens to you, 90% how you react.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But we have to know how to react for that actually to to be beneficial.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're just going to let the
Right.
emotional side of who we are
Yep.
just take complete control.
Yep. And our thoughts, man, they're so powerful and they'll lead us down the rabbit hole. And so we have to be able to catch those thoughts and
Yeah.
redirect them because there's a lot of power in that too. Like I
Yeah.
said, our mind is a powerful thing.
Yeah, amazing.
And if we can redirect our thoughts and acknowledge our emotions, proceed mindfully, we're going to feel a lot better.
Amazing. Guys, I don't know how many times I say this, but you can do it. If I can do it, then I know you can do it.
Right.
is how I see that. But being able to regulate your emotions is the absolute again, that's where it all starts, right? Being able to control those thoughts, because your thoughts lead to your actions, which lead to your habits, which lead to your character. I can't remember who said that, but
Yeah, your thoughts lead
I'm
to your
saying it
feelings,
now.
which lead to your actions. Yep.
There you go. So
Yep.
again, this is why I have Lindsay here to keep me on track. But if you guys have gotten benefit from this, please hit the like button. Share this with whoever it is that you think needs to hear it. And we love you guys, and we will see you on the next one.